You walk into your apartment and the door clicks shut behind you like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, empty sentence. No messages. No missed calls. No echoes of laughter lingering from last night because there was no last night. Just silence, and not the gentle, candlelit kind. This one buzzes like a faulty light bulb in a motel hallway. You toss your bag onto the floor, not caring where it lands. The weight of loneliness isn't just emotional, it has a physical presence. You feel it in your chest, a vacuum where air should be. It follows you room to room like a stray cat, meowing when you sit still. You ask yourself, why does this feel so loud? That silence becomes almost accusatory. A jury of quiet stares. This is not solitude. Solitude is chosen. This is abandonment, or at least, that's how your brain frames it. You check your phone again. Still nothing. Loneliness is not just being alone. It's realizing no one is trying to find you. And yet, here's what you don't know yet. The Stoics believed this moment, this very ache, is the beginning of something holy. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." You squint at that idea. It sounds beautiful, but also like something someone says after too much wine. But Marcus wasn't being poetic. He was being clinical. For the Stoics, loneliness wasn't a sign of failure. It was a test. A measure of how much of your self-worth is tied to others. And more importantly, how much of your peace you've outsourced. You remember being in a crowded bar last month. Music thumping, people screaming stories into each other's ears. And yet you felt the same pit. You laughed on cue, nodded at jokes, took the selfies. But no one saw you, not really. So what's worse? Being alone, or being invisible in a crowd? Here's the cruel trick of modern life. Technology connects us to everyone, and yet we feel less seen than ever. The Roman Stoics didn't have DMs or read receipts, but they knew this feeling. Seneca wrote letters to friends who wouldn't reply for weeks, months even. And still, he urged us to become our own company, to train the soul not to crave applause, but virtue. You shuffle into the kitchen, open the fridge, close it. Nothing in there but expired mustard and maybe a metaphor. You find yourself thinking, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I'm not supposed to be this alone. But who told you that? Was it your parents? Movies? Instagram influencers lounging with their 6 dogs and perfect partners? Loneliness only hurts because we think it's unnatural. The Stoics would raise an eyebrow at that. They'd say, you were born alone. You will die alone. What happens in between is mostly illusion. Harsh? Maybe, but also freeing. If you can come to terms with this, that aloneness is your native state, then the sting fades. Still, it's hard to convince your nervous system. Your body paces like an animal in a cage. You keep looking for some external proof that you matter. And the longer it takes, the more you spiral. The more your inner monologue turns on itself. Why isn't anyone calling? Why doesn't anyone care? What's wrong with me? This is the dangerous crossroad, the moment where loneliness becomes suffering. Because suffering, as Epictetus would say, is not caused by events but by your opinion of them. You suffer not because you're alone, but because you believe being alone means you're unworthy. That's a belief, and beliefs can be replaced. So you sit down, not because you want to, but because you have nowhere left to run. The chair is cold, the room is unkind, but there's nowhere to go but inward. This is where the Stoic journey begins, not with a crowd cheering you on, but with a quiet voice whispering, this too is training. You light a candle just because. You sit with yourself like a guest who overstayed their welcome. And eventually, the discomfort fades a little. Not gone, but dulled. Like your brain is starting to realize it's not in danger. You're just here. The Stoics believed that no one should be a slave to the presence or absence of others. That the soul must be enough company for the soul. But how? How do you rewire a heart trained to crave connection? We'll get there. For now, just stay. You've already taken the hardest step, facing the silence without flinching. The rest is learning how to speak back. Not in panic, but in power. The room hasn't changed. But maybe, just maybe, you have. You wake up the next morning to the same emptiness, but now it's different. You know this feeling isn't just a random glitch in your social currency. Loneliness has its own anatomy, and today, you will inspect it like a surgeon. As you roll out of bed, you feel the familiar ache, a hollow, echoing where connection should be. You start to invent stories to explain why no one called last night. Maybe your friend is upset with you. Maybe they don't think you're interesting anymore. Maybe you said something wrong in that group chat. The narrative spins itself faster than you can catch it, and before long, you believe these stories as if they were carved in marble. In reality, those stories are just fabrications, like someone scribbling graffiti on the walls of your mind. You're convinced that loneliness is proof of your unworthiness. You think, if I were interesting enough, someone would reach out. If I were lovable enough, my phone would buzz. But here's the thing, you're not experiencing a fact, you're experiencing the interpretation of a fact. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught, it is not events themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about these events. You are not disturbed by being alone, you're disturbed by believing being alone means you're worthless. So today you decide to catch the lie. You pace across the room, then pause, noticing the cold tile beneath your feet. You label the sensation. This is discomfort. This is the skin's reaction to solitude. You take a slow breath. In the corner of your eye, you see a notification pop up, an email from a colleague about work. You breathe out. That's something. But your mind immediately flashes to, they're only emailing because they need a favor. You almost type a wry reply, happy to help as long as it suits you. But the moment you catch yourself, you apply the Stoic scalpel. What's the evidence that they think of you only as a tool? You delete the snarky drafts your brain typed in seconds. You remind yourself of what Seneca wrote, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. You ask, what's the difference between what's actually happening and what I'm imagining? The cold truth is, you're telling yourself stories to fill the silence. And those stories have masks and fangs. Look around. The room is unchanged, faded wallpaper, a half-empty coffee mug on the nightstand, the faint glow of morning streaking through the blinds. None of these things judge your loneliness. Yet your mind is already narrating. This room is ghostly. You're the only one here. This is proof. But that's just one interpretation. There are others. This is my sanctuary. A place where I can learn who I truly am when stripped of distractions. You choose which story to believe, and that choice is everything. Academic debate still churns around whether the Stoic approach to emotion is identical to cognitive behavioral therapy or if it's a separate discipline with its own philosophical destiny. Modern psychologists might label your self-generated stories as cognitive distortions, while Stoic scholars would call them erroneous judgments or false impressions. Regardless of semantics, the remedy is similar. Catch the distortion, interrogate it, and replace it with a more objective perspective. You linger in the kitchen, pouring water into the coffee maker. The machine gurgles, and steam rises like a forgiving mist. You take the mug in your hands, feel its warmth seep into your palms. In that simple sensation, you realize you're not entirely alone. You have yourself. But even this thought is tricky. You flicker between, what's the point of myself if no one else cares? And I am enough. Which one will you choose? The Stoics would say, be content with what you have, rejoice in the way things are. Quaint words, but practice dissolves the doubt. To practice, you decide to write a brief note, just a sentence or two, to someone you haven't connected with in a while. It's not a plea for attention, just an honest check-in. Hey, hope you're well. Been thinking about you. Your heart flutters as the words hover above the screen. It feels like stepping off a cliff. Because if they don't reply, your mind will scream, see? No one cares. If they do reply, you'll say, of course they still care. Either way, it's a risk. You hit send. The note sails into the void, where it might collect nothing or might become a lifeline. You exhale, and you notice your chest isn't as tight. That's interesting, a tiny act, a small vulnerability, and you've paused the narrative for a moment. You imagine the Stoics nodding, approving your courage to face discomfort rather than dodge it. Later, you decide to take a walk. Outside, The world buzzes with connection. Dogs dragging leashes, couples sharing coffee, co-workers laughing on a park bench. You feel like an invisible observer in someone else's movie. That sting returns, but you practice what you preach. You notice the sting, label it, and ask, am I being erased, or am I just choosing not to participate? The answer surfaces, you're choosing to observe, which is fine. You keep walking, each footstep a reminder, you still exist whether you're included or not. On a park bench, you tune into people watching. A young woman scrolls through her phone, then sighs heavily. A man on a bench 2 seats down nods at her and points to the sky. Perhaps he offers solace, perhaps small talk. She looks up, and for a moment, you see relief warming her face. You wonder if she's also wrestling with loneliness. You consider approaching but decide instead to reflect on how many times you've seen someone lost in their own head and assumed they had it all together. Now you know better. Loneliness often hides behind the mask of contentment. While you sit, you recall the story of Marcus Aurelius meditating alone on a battlefield, despite being surrounded by thousands of soldiers. He wrote his meditations not for an audience but as a conversation with his own mind. Even emperors, surrounded by power advisors, glistening armor, endless pomp, felt the sting of isolation. Yet they used it to refine their character rather than crumble. Scholars still puzzle over how Marcus maintained compassion while commanding legions, but one thread is clear. He saw solitude not as punishment, but as a blank canvas for inner dialogue. You breathe in autumn's chill. A leaf drifts down and settles on your lap. You turn it over, noticing its veins, delicate, intricate. For a brief moment, you marvel that something so frail could survive so long. Loneliness might feel fatal, but like this leaf, you persist through seasons. You might burn or fall, but the cycle continues. You run a finger along the leaf's edge and feel the texture, brittle, yet full of history. You remember that nature teaches endurance in the face of inevitable decay. As you stand, you ask yourself, what if loneliness is not just a void but an invitation? An invitation to look inward, to understand your own rhythm, to build an inner citadel. Epictetus said, the key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. But if you're alone, you have only one companion, yourself. So your relationship with yourself becomes the most important one. If you can stand your own company, you stand unshaken, even when the world drifts away. You recall a friend's wedding invitation you ignored, assuming you'd be lonely among couples. You tell your brain to hush, because being alone at a wedding is just another chance to see human connection from a distance, not evidence you're unloved. You could choose to go, observe, maybe even smile at strangers. Or you could stay home and journal about why weddings feel like an indictment of your single status. The Stoic in you nudges. Observe, don't assign blame. Each choice is data. You opt to attend. You suit up, feel the fabric of your shirt against your skin, and step out again into potential discomfort. At the reception, music swirls. You find an empty chair at the edge of the dance floor and sit. You overhear a toast to love and laughter. You feel the familiar tug, loneliness whispering that you're an outsider. But then you remember, you're not striving for applause, you're striving for virtue. You straighten your posture, uncross your arms. You remind yourself that your worth isn't tethered to a +1. You raise your glass when the photographer calls for toasts, and in that simple act of participation, you pierce the bubble of your self-imposed isolation. Later, someone sits beside you, a distant cousin you barely recognize. They smile shyly and make small talk. Your knee-jerk reaction is to shrug, to retreat, but you catch yourself. This is a chance to practice connection without expectation. You ask them about their life, their job, and you listen. You're not pretending to be someone else, you're simply present. It isn't thunderous friendship, but it's enough. Enough to remind you again, connection can be gentle when you lower your guard. As the night winds down, you head home under an indigo sky. The air feels crisper, the silence less accusing. You realize you've been telling yourself that loneliness is permanent, but it's just a current, sometimes strong, sometimes weak. And currents are navigable if you learn to swim rather than drown. Back in your apartment, you make tea, sit by the window, and watch stars appear. It feels different now. The room isn't a cage but a chapel of solitude. You feel your shoulders unfurl. The absence of noise becomes a cushion, not a blade. You reflect on the day's narratives, the stories you almost believed, the leaf's lesson in endurance, the warmth of a toddler connection at the wedding. You note that loneliness doesn't vanish, it transforms. It becomes a tool to sharpen self-awareness rather than a weapon to tear you apart. Scholars still argue whether Stoics advocated complete emotional detachment or a tempered indifference where feelings could exist but not dominate. Some insist Stoicism breeds cold apathy. Others claim it fosters genuine empathy because, once you stop chasing external approval, you can see others more clearly. In your own life, you felt that shift. When you're at peace alone, you can truly listen to another's loneliness without envy. You can offer solace because you've sat in the silence yourself and emerged whole. You finish your tea, set the mug on the table, and close your eyes. You think, I was scared this morning. I thought solitude meant erasure. But solitude can be sacred space. You feel the hush of your heartbeat, the whisper of your breath. You've begun rewiring your brain, trading invented stories for observed truths. Loneliness may still visit, but now it's a guest, not a tormentor. For now, you sleep. You might wake tomorrow to an empty inbox, a silent phone, but you will remember that those are not verdicts on your value. They're just data points in a broader map of self-discovery. And so long as you keep drawing that map, you'll never truly be lost. You glance at your phone one last time before sliding it into your jacket pocket. No new messages. No missed calls blipping on the screen. At first, it feels personal, like the universe itself has ghosted you. You clutch the ringing silence as if it were evidence that you've been cut out, deleted from someone's mental Rolodex. But then you remember a story from ancient Rome. The gods themselves, emperors believed, could not guarantee a reply when they whispered their prayers. You picture a supplicant facing marble columns, arms raised to silent skies, and you realize you're in good company. When even the gods don't answer, what hope is there for mortal souls? You recall the last time a friend just vanished. You thought you two were inseparable, coffee dates, late-night texts, shared memes. Then one morning, you saw last seen today, and a week later it became last seen a week ago. Your messages went unanswered. You waited for receipts that never appeared. The silence burned hotter than any insult. You replayed every interaction, searching for the moment you tripped the trapdoor into oblivion. You felt like a traitor in your own life. That gut punch of being ghosted is different from overt rejection. When someone tells you, "I'm not interested," at least you can see them walk away. Ghosting is a shadow slide. No goodbye, no closure, just a vanishing act that leaves you haunted by questions. In psychological studies, researchers still debate whether ghosting inflicts more pain than a direct breakup. Some argue that ambiguity intensifies the agony because your brain craves answers. Others counter that at least with a breakup, you can redirect your anger towards someone tangible. With ghosting, your mind fixates on phantom possibilities. What did I do wrong? Am I unworthy? The Stoics would label these phantom possibilities as errant judgments, mental echoes that fester without foundation. Seneca warned, worrying is carrying tomorrow's load with today's strength, carrying 2 days at once. It is moving into tomorrow ahead of time. In your case, it's carrying unanswerable questions into tomorrow. You begin to see that each wild scenario you invent is a burden you drag along. Maybe they drifted away because you weren't funny enough. Maybe they secretly hate you. Maybe they found someone better. None of these theories are facts. They're merely mental constructs feeding your hunger for meaning. So tonight, you take a different approach. Emotional detachment. You decide not to invest further energy in someone who refuses to invest it back. But what does that even mean? Does it make you cold-hearted? Does it erect a wall that keeps you from caring? You pace in your living room, deliberately observing each thought as it arises. You feel the tingle in your chest, the sting of confusion and grief. You label it, "This is hurt." You let it sit there without feeding it with stories. Then you question, what's within my control? You can't control whether she texts you back. You can control your own response. That's the Stoic starting point. Recognize what's in your sphere, your judgments, choices, and actions, and release the rest. You lie on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the chat window. You draft a message, something polite yet witty. Hey, notice you've gone radio silent. Hope you're okay. Your thumb hovers over send. For a fleeting moment, you consider sending it just to coax out a reaction. But then you remember Epictetus' line, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen." In other words, if she doesn't want to talk, your wish for conversation is mismatched with reality. Better to redirect your wish toward understanding and acceptance rather than clinging to an outcome. You delete the draft. You exhale. In that breath, you feel a shiver of freedom, no longer tethered to someone who refused your existence. It's not triumph, it's relief from an endless tug-of-war that never had a finish line. You realize that detachment is not a wall, but a doorway. A doorway through which you step away from phantom pains to confront the only person you can change, yourself. As the night deepens, you remember the tale of the Stoic poet and soldier, Cato Eudocensus. After the fall of Carthage, Cato was weary of a corrupt Rome. He walked quietly into the Senate, declared that he would rather die than live under tyranny, and eventually took his own life, not out of despair but as the ultimate act of agency. The details of Cato's decision are still contested by historians. Did he do it for honor, to galvanize resistance, or as a protest against moral decay? Regardless, his choice exemplifies the Stoic conviction that when external forces strip you of dignity, the only true control you have is over your own mind and actions. In your situation, the ghoster has no such moral clarity, so you take up Cato's mantle of self-governance, but with a gentler aim, preserving your emotional dignity. You rise and head to the kitchen for water. The faucet's hiss seems loud in the dark apartment. You feel the cool glass against your fingertips and you wonder, how long have I let silence dictate my worth? Loneliness curls its icy fingers around your spine, but you meet it head-on. You fill the water and take a slow sip, tasting mineral tang. Over the next few days, you enact a small experiment in deliberate detachment. You vow not to check the chat window more than once a day. Each time your thumb hovers over the chat's icon, you pause and ask, what am I hoping to find? You recognize that what you're searching for is validation, proof that you still exist in someone's mind. But that validation must come from within. To cultivate that, you start journaling for 5 minutes each morning, just bullet points. I exist. I have worth. I choose purpose over approval. At first, it feels forced. Your pen hesitates. But gradually, you sense those words settling like bricks in your soul's foundation. You also turn to your physical space for clues. In your bedroom, you face the mess you've been ignoring. Clothes strewn, dishes piled in the sink. You begin tidying, not to chase away loneliness, but to reclaim agency in your surroundings. Each discarded shirt thrown into the hamper, each plate rinsed and stacked, feels like a small victory. It's not transformative, but it's tangible. And Stoics believed in making progress through small acts. As Marcus Aurelius said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. One afternoon, you venture out to a cafe where you once used to meet that friend who ghosted you. The barista greets you, and you sense an undercurrent of awkwardness. She asks if you're here alone. You nod, feign a casual smile, and order a coffee. You sit down at your usual table, the one by the window, and you resist the urge to stare at your phone. Instead, you pull out a book, a Stoic text you've been reading in small increments. Seneca's words spill across the page. We must be content with a small number of things, for they are easy to overlook when we crave them all. You let your mind expand on that phrase. You sip your coffee, bitter and sharp, and you feel the warmth burn away the chatter. Across the room, someone catches your eye, a stranger reading the same book. She nods and you nod back. In that moment, a fleeting connection sparks. No words exchanged, no numbers shared. Yet you feel recognized, not by a friend you long for, but by the shared thread of human seeking. You realize that you don't need someone specific to validate you. There are countless souls around you, each wrestling with their own silence. You're not alone in your loneliness. Walking home later, you feel a shift. The sidewalk feels solid. You still feel the phantom pang of an unanswered text, but you no longer let it overshadow every moment. You remember Epictetus again. Don't let your reflection on the whole sweep of life crush you. Don't fill your mind with all the bad things that might still happen. Stay focused on the present situation and ask yourself why it's so unbearable and can't be survived. In other words, ask, why is this ghosting so unbearable now? The answer emerges, because you once believed your worth was in someone else's message. But now you see that worth is intrinsic, unshakable even if someone vanishes. At home, you sleep deeper than you have in weeks. Occasionally, you dream of that silent chat window, but in the dream, you hover over send and then wake without sending. You wake feeling both relief and a strange sense of triumph. A week later, a notification finally appears, a concise message. Sorry, got busy. Everything okay? You notice an unexpected feeling. You are not eager to reply. The momentum has shifted. The old narrative, I must respond to prove I'm not invisible, has lost its power. Instead, you pause and ask, is this response necessary? Or do I respond from a place of genuine desire to connect? You take a moment, then type, hey, thanks for checking in. I'm doing well. Hope you are too. You hit send with calm intention, neither chasing warmth nor recoiling from coldness. As you put down your phone, you sense the final lesson of Stoic detachment. Emotional independence isn't isolation, it's a form of abundance. You have more to offer to any relationship when you don't need it to define you. The stranger in the cafe was enough. Your own reflection in your apartment mirror is enough. When even the gods don't text back, you become your own divine interlocutor, speaking to the soul that has always mattered most. You carry forward the calm, like a torch lit in darkness, knowing that the true alchemy of loneliness happens not when you're alone, but when you decide to use it. Today, that decision means turning solitude into a training ground for your mind. Picture a Spartan training camp, minus the spears and armor, just you and the raw materials of your thoughts, emotions, and choices. It's a battlefield where loneliness is the drill sergeant barking instructions in your ear. You either crumble or you grow stronger. You begin your morning in your small apartment, sunlight slanting through dusty blinds. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, you sit cross-legged on the floor. No cushion, no warm blanket, just the hardwood beneath your thighs. Your spine is straight, shoulders dropped, fingertips resting on your knees. You close your eyes and focus on your breath, letting each inhale and exhale anchor you to this very moment. For a fleeting second, you taste the urge to rise, make coffee, distract yourself. But you stay put. This is your moment to train. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius viewed challenges as opportunities. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Right now, the impediment is your loneliness, the whispered thought, no one is here to comfort you. But that is the way. You breathe in and out, each cycle clarifying that your strength doesn't depend on external presence. Your body trembles as your mind pushes past the urge to flee this discomfort. 1 minute becomes 2, 2 becomes 5. Each passing second deepens your resolve. You're not meditating to become a guru, you're meditating to become unbreakable. When you finally open your eyes, you feel the room is the same, but you are not. You pour water into a glass and drink slowly, tasting every drop. You imagine each swallow as fueling a furnace of self-reliance. Today's training involves journaling. You grab your worn notebook, break out a pen, and write, "I choose to use loneliness as my teacher, not my tormentor." In the old narrative, you wrote entries filled with self-pity, pages of "Why me? Can't anyone see me?" Now, your pages read differently. What did I learn last night? How did I respond? What can I improve? You recall another Stoic practice, premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. But here, you invert it. Instead of imagining worst-case scenarios to inoculate your mind against them, you visualize worst-case loneliness, perhaps losing your job, watching friends drift away, facing complete isolation. You let that scenario unspool in your imagination. No paycheck, no social circles, no family near. You feel the familiar knot tighten in your chest. But this time you stay with it. You ask, what would I do if it all came crashing down? You imagine yourself finding a new routine, rising early to write, exploring parks alone, volunteering to teach underprivileged children, creating meaning even when the world seems to have turned its back on you. As the images play out, you don't let them consume you, you let them teach you. You realize that if you can learn to function, even thrive, in imagined utter solitude, then real-life loneliness holds no power to crush you. You've practiced resilience in advance. You've rehearsed your response. Each rehearsal is like lifting a weight. Your mental muscles grow stronger with every set. Next, you establish a daily solitude routine, a series of actions you commit to when no one else is around. First, you decide to learn something new for 30 minutes each day. Today it's basic conversational Italian. You pull out your language app and repeat phrases softly, "Buongiorno," "Come stay." The unfamiliar sounds roll off your tongue awkwardly, but each mispronounced syllable reminds you that you're meeting an inner challenge head-on. In your mind, you're not just learning Italian, you're proving that being alone doesn't mean stagnation. It means expansion. After language practice, you move to physical training. You set up a small spot in the corner, yoga mat rolled out, dumbbells within reach. You perform a series of bodyweight exercises, push-ups, planks, squats. Each rep is a declaration, I am not a victim of my solitude. Your muscles burn, your heart pulses faster, and sweat beads on your forehead. You notice a stray thought creeping in. If someone were here, I'd have company. You recognize the temptation, then push it aside. You transform that scratch of longing into fuel for one more push-up. When your arms tremble, you remember Seneca's warning, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. By midday, you've already used your alone time to sharpen both mind and body. You feel the hunger pangs, but instead of ordering takeout, you cook a simple meal. You chop vegetables with methodical focus, carrots, peppers, onions. The knife's edge glides through each slice, and for a moment, you taste the satisfaction of self-sufficiency. You sauté the veggies, add spices, and feel the aroma fill the kitchen. You plate your food and eat slowly, savoring textures and flavors. In the act of cooking for one, you embrace your own company. You see that nourishment need not be shared to be meaningful. The afternoon brings work. You open your laptop and dive into important tasks. Normally, you'd have background noise, music, podcasts, or friends messaging. Not today. Today, you commit to distraction-free focus. You write reports, schedule projects, analyze data, and each task completed feels like a small victory. You resist the urge to check social media every 10 minutes, knowing that each scroll is a retreat from training. Instead, you use momentum. Finish one task, move to next. The flow state emerges. For a few hours, loneliness dissolves into deep work. You're no longer someone yearning for connection. You're a creator, absorbed in the act of building something valuable. When work winds down, a new challenge arises: free time. For many, free time widens the chasm of loneliness. You decide not to let that happen. You reach for a long-neglected hobby, playing the guitar. The instrument sits dusty in the corner, waiting. You recall basic chords, T, C, D, and your fingers fumble across strings. You produce screeching notes and clumsy transitions. But each misstep is a lesson. You keep practicing, adopting a stoic mindset. An imperfect attempt is better than no attempt. You play for half an hour, and though your guitar never sounds like it's tuned, you feel a sense of progress. You are alone, yes, but you are also engaged in creation. Loneliness recedes into the background. As dusk settles, you decide to connect with the broader world, but on your terms. You open your computer and join an online Stoic discussion forum. A thread about managing emotions draws you in. You post a comment, "How do Stoics view the fear of permanent solitude?" Within minutes, responses trickle in. One person shares insights from a Seneca letter. Another offers a modern psychological angle. You reply thoughtfully. In this virtual exchange, you find a transient form of companionship, a meeting of minds across miles. It's not perfect, but it's real connection devoid of pressure. You realize that solitude and connection need not be polar opposites. They can coexist when you choose quality over quantity. Night falls and you prepare for what many dread, going to bed alone. You dim the lights, stretch, and jot final reflections in your journal. Today I used my solitude as fuel. I trained my body, practiced new skills, and connected with minds across the globe. I felt lonely, but I did not let it cripple me. You add, I begin to see that isolation is not my enemy, but my gym. You close your notebook, run your fingers along its worn spine, and feel gratitude for this tool of self-accountability. As your head hits the pillow, you recall the Stoic phrase from Marcus Aurelius, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." You feel the mattress cradle you, and rather than a void of loneliness, you feel the presence of your own resolve. The silence of the night is no longer accusatory. It is a space for the fountain to bubble. Your breathing slows and you sense a shift. The trap of loneliness, believing yourself diminished by absence, has weakened. You recognize that every challenge you face today, every moment you reframed longing into purposeful action, built a deeper reservoir of self-trust. You drift toward sleep, not as a weary victim of solitude, but as a warrior resting after a rigorous training session. Tonight, you won't dream of a packed room or a familiar voice. Instead, you'll dream of the path ahead, a path where loneliness is not an enemy but a powerful instructor, honing you into a more resilient version of yourself. You wake up to the faint hum of your alarm, and for a moment your chest tightens. The old reflex flickers. What if someone else is asleep right now, missing me? But then you remember that you have learned something fundamental. Loneliness is not a verdict but a condition you can outgrow. You slide out of bed without reaching for your phone. No need. You already know that today, you don't need anyone to validate your existence. You stand by the window and let morning light cascade over your skin. The city below stirs, cars rumble, neighbors shout, dogs bark. Once, you might have felt like an asteroid floating above it all, bystander to unmistakable life. But today you sense something different. A subtle hum of connection that doesn't require another person to reach out for you to feel its presence. It's as if the entire universe is whispering, you are already part of this. You brush your teeth, and the mirror shows a familiar face. A little thinner, a little more lined, but unmistakably you. For the first time in weeks, the reflection doesn't flicker with panic or agony. Instead, you see calm determination in your own eyes. A memory surfaces. 6 months ago you attended a friend's party, perched awkwardly on a stool, feeling like an outsider in a crowded room. Today, you know you would have joined the laughter or retreated to a quiet corner on your own terms. Either way, you would have been okay. Breakfast is simple: oatmeal, honey, fresh berries. You savor each spoonful, noticing texture and flavor. In the past, you cooked only for company. Cooking for one felt pointless. Now, each grain of oats reminds you of small victories won when no one was watching. The sweetness of honey is not enhanced by sharing, it's simply sweetness. A Stoic might call this internal flourishing. Seneca urged, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. You feel that presence, straightforward and unhurried. After breakfast, you head to work. Public transport is filled with headphones-wearing commuters, scrolling through their phones as if drowning out the world. Once, you would have felt conspicuous without earbuds, fearing a glance might expose your solitude. Today, you simply sit. If someone glances at you, you nod politely and look back at the window. A snippet of a conversation drifts to your ears. Did you hear about the promotion? A stranger shrugs. You don't feel excluded. You feel mercifully unattached. You think of Epictetus. What upsets people is not things themselves but their judgments about these things. You judge none of this as your absence of connection. At your desk, you start working on a challenging project. One that intimidates you because you must operate without a team of collaborators. But as you dive into the work, you remember an earlier day when you had no choice but to tackle a similar problem alone. It felt like a drift in a storm. You labored, sweat beading at your brow, until you cracked the solution. The triumph felt electric, and you realized then that your abilities were not dependent on anyone else's presence or praise. You smile at that memory and begin to draft outlines, bullet points, and design sketches. Each sentence builds on your own competence rather than any external validation. Your lunch break arrives. You walk to a nearby park where you used to meet colleagues for sandwiches. Today, you pack your own salad and find a bench under a sprawling oak. Beneath the leafy canopy, you close your eyes and feel the breeze rustle through the branches. The rustling leaves almost feel like whispered applause. As you eat, you reflect on the path that led here. Moments of panic, dark nights spent scrolling for messages, the compulsion to fill every silence. You think, all of those moments were trailers for this feature, this understanding that being alone does not equate to being unimportant. An academic debate still bubbles beneath the surface of your new calm. Scholars argue whether Stoic self-sufficiency verges on arrogance, or if it can lead to genuine empathy. Some claim that a person who no longer needs anyone risks becoming aloof, unable to truly connect. Others respond that when you no longer chase validation, you can connect more authentically, unburdened by need. Today, as you sit beneath the oak, you sense a synthesis. You are self-sufficient without being aloof. You value connection without needing it to define you. The hum of traffic and distant laughter feel like a choir, and you are one of many voices, not cast aside but harmonizing in your own key. The afternoon brings a sudden storm. Clouds roll in, thunder rumbles, and rain lashes the windows. You could call a friend to complain about the weather. You could scroll through social media to feel less stranded. But instead, you seize the moment. You close your office door, set a timer for 5 minutes, and practice a stoic breathing exercise. You place a hand on your heart and let the storm's roar become your teacher. Even the sky rages, and yet it always clears. You count 5 slow inhales and 5 long exhales. With each cycle, your pulse finds a calmer rhythm. You imagine Marcus Aurelius holding this same posture, half a world away, as thunder pealed over a Roman hill. When the storm subsides, you close your computer and head home. The sky is washed clean, and a rainbow arcs faintly in the distance. You pause in the hallway, letting droplets that clung to your hair drip onto the floor. A reflex flares. If only someone were here to share this. But then you realize, in sharing this, you are relaying it to yourself. You take a step forward with quiet gratitude. I am here. I am alive. I can bear wonder alone. That's enough. Evening arrives, and you finish a light dinner. You consider calling your friend, the one who ghosted you months ago. But you also consider that any conversation initiated from a place of lingering need would be hollow, like pouring water into a cracked cup. Instead, you reach for your notebook and write one last reflection. Today, I discovered that I no longer needed another voice to confirm my presence. My own breath, my own thoughts, and the world around were enough. You set the pen down and sit in the hush. The room is dimly lit, and the silence no longer feels accusatory. It feels spacious, like a canvas primed for an artist. You turn off the lights, and your apartment darkens. The faint glow of street lamps filters in, casting gentle patterns across the floor. You crawl into bed and feel the sheets enveloping you in softness. You recall Seneca's words, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Tonight, the greatest remedy for loneliness is acceptance. These ancient voices are your lullaby, coaching you not to flee the quiet but to cradle it. Your mind drifts, and you picture a future moment when you will look back on this time as a turning point. A moment when you realize that your worth was not contingent on anyone else's presence. Perhaps you will have relationships, friendships, and shared experiences in the future. Perhaps you won't, but it won't matter because you have already performed the hardest act of self-validation. You have loved the only person you cannot leave, yourself. As sleep gathers you into its arms, you feel not abandonment but unity with something vast. You are alone, yes, but not deserted. You are a participant in the grand tapestry of existence, woven from threads of solitude and connection alike. You drift off, confident that tomorrow, if loneliness returns, you will greet it not as a foe but as an ally. You feel a gentle exhale sweep through your chest as the night deepens. The world's edges soften into shadows that glide slowly across your blanket. Your muscles relax, and your breathing becomes as steady as a distant tide. Imagine each breath as a slow wave lapping against a shore, a quiet rhythm that carries away the residue of old fears. The silence is no longer heavy. It's a soft, warm quilt wrapping around your thoughts, inviting them to drift. In this dim light, the city's distant hum feels like a soft lullaby. You might recall how yesterday you thought you needed someone else's voice to break the hush. But now, you realize that even the silent moments can speak. The tiny flicker of traffic lights, the faint hum of nighttime air, each is a gentle reminder that life continues around you, even when you are still. Let go of any lingering tension and imagine the stress melting like snow under a lazy sun. Your mind's chatter slows, each thought drifting farther apart like clouds parting to reveal an infinite sky. There is no rush to scrub out every single worry. Simply let them dissolve in this gentle hush. You've walked through the storm and emerged quiet, not empty. Here, in this final moment before sleep, let your body remember what calm feels like. Notice how your spine sinks into the mattress, how your eyelids grow heavy, how your heartbeat rests from its steady work. Embrace the darkness as a soft cradle, letting each inhale and exhale guide you deeper into rest. No more striving, no more reaching, just the soft promise of tomorrow's light. What small act of self-reliance will you practice tomorrow to remind yourself you are enough? If this journey into Stoic solitude resonates, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below.